Togametse birungi ssebo waliwo bye njagala twandibwabisa amesa
Good morning, Flavia.
Morning, how are you?
I'm okay, how are you?
Fine now.
Mm.
I need the title for Block 255, Plot 59.
Has anything else go?
Block 255, Plot 59, Nyonyo. I don't know if you have that title.
Wait a minute, please, I can tell you.
We are taking for registration of letter.
Registration of letters.
Yeah, registration of letters, administration.
Wow.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are very welcome to our Fidelis Leadership Institute Regulation and Competitiveness webinar. We're exploring this morning the balance between competition regulation, abuse of market dominance, and fairness in the market. My name is Fiona Wall. I'm the Executive Director of the Fidelis Leadership Institute, and I'm very today to have a fantastic panel. The Right Honorable Alitwala Kadaga has been a chief of competition matters in the region, and we are very proud to say that she is actually one of the people that has championed regionalizations in the region, and we are very proud at the Fidelis Leadership Institute that last year when we launched our East African Competition Regulation and Consumer Protection Network, we were able to have the Right Honorable Rebecca Alitwala Kadaga accept graciously to be our patron. As the Fidelis Leadership Institute, we also boast a partnership with the COMESA Competition Commission, under which we are doing all these awareness sessions, and we are also doing a lot of trainings and certified programs that you can get access to if you go to our website in competition regulation and consumer protection. And we're also very proud as the institute that the CEO of the COMESA Competition Commission is our patron, and that is Dr. Willard Mwemba. I want to say hello to the members of the East African Commission that are here, but let me begin with our protocol. The Right Honorable Rebecca Alitwala Kadaga, our first Deputy Premier and Prime Minister for East African Affairs, senior lawyers present, our panelists. For our panelists, we have Dr. Anthea Paleo, Mr. Michael Njenga. We also have with us Mr. Kaja Timothy and Ms. Julian Mwehire. And I want to thank them for showing up on time and being with us today as we speak about this topic. Of course, not to forget our very own commissioner representing our commissioner on the COMESA Competition Commission, Mr. Sam Watasa. He is also online, and he'll be one of the people that are talking to us today. Without further ado, I'd like to just bring your attention to an introductory question that is in the chat, and I'd like you to use that to answer that question. And we're asking, of the 4 options that I'm going to give you, what do you think is the biggest challenge in balancing regulation and competition? This is in the chat, and we have option 1 being excessive government intervention, 2 being market monopolization by dominant players, 3 being weak enforcement of competition laws, and 4 being lack of consumer awareness. And we already have some responses from Caleb Rukundo and from our senior, Mr. Philip Karugaba, who's also a beloved alumni of the FLI Institute and a partner and a mentor of it. And they've talked about 3 and 4, and they've also talked about Mr. Karugaba has said, if it is restricted to Uganda, give us an option that includes Nyombi. Well, I think Julian, we're here, will have something to say about that, Philip. Thank you so much for all the lawyers and practitioners in the business world that are online. I see people from the Chamber of Commerce in Uganda. I see people from the East African Business Council. I see some people from the Law Society in Uganda. We are also told that some members from the Law Society of Kenya and the Kenya Competition Authority will be around, so we look forward to that. So as we continue, please, would like to hear from you all what you think is the response for our question in the chat. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the Fidelis Leadership Institute. This is an institute that was formed in 2019 by a group of young people that wanted to ensure that we educate and equip Africans to be ethical, to be meaningful and transformative, and to also get a platform in order to drive the change that we want to see in Africa. So while our goal is to create a critical mass of ethical leaders in Africa, our main objective is to ensure that we remember always that it is only Africans that will save Africa. We have every resource, but we need to introduce ethics to our equation in order for things to matter. Economies like ours, that were like us in the 60s, like the BRICS economies, have all moved into the first world because they had leaders that said what they meant and meant what they said. And while we are asking, I also want to celebrate the women this month. This is Women's Month, and the theme is, that's why I'm also very happy that Minister for East African Affairs is a woman and a champion of women. And our theme this year is accelerating action, stopping all the work we've done in paying lip service to gender balance, to actually, and gender equity, to actually making sure that we put action there. So in the same way, we've talked a lot about the competition regulation aspects in the East African region. We've talked a lot about the legislation, but there's some real realities that we're facing. We've seen some cases where we don't understand our regulators and some of the actions they're taking, but sometimes also we need to understand that yes, monopolies happen and sometimes they might have their benefits, but how do we control them? How do we control abuse of dominance? How do we ensure consumer protection in a capitalist environment? And how do we make sure that regionalization works for African, local, in homebred businesses as opposed to against them? And I think today we have the authority of authorities to tell us about this. And the Fidelis Leadership Institute, the work we're doing under competition, regulation, and consumer protection in the region, in partnership with the COMESA Competition Commission, is also, we're also trying to create a critical mass of competition law practitioners and competition regulation and consumer protection practitioners under the East African Competition Regulation and Consumer Protection Network. So if you are interested in that, we will be able to put some information in the chat on how you can register. And I want to say that today we are officially going to see the launch of our East African Competition Regulation and Consumer Protection Conference that will take place in June. And we are very happy to say that our guest of honor this morning is going to do the launch, the e-launch, which we will dramatize much later. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. And I'm just checking 1 minute if she's available. And as I'm checking, if she's already, I know she's already online, but I'm just checking on that. And if I just want to notice that I want to greet everybody who has greeted us, like Susan Najika and Keith Busindre, and ask that you put your responses as well. Just give me 1 minute as I make sure that our guest of honor is on. As our guest of honor comes online properly, I just wanted us to see the program that we're going to have today. We're going to have some welcome remarks, which I've already done. We're going to have our keynote address, which is understanding the role of regulation in market competition. And our keynote address will be Julian Wehire, and she is she's sorry, our She is online, yes, I see her. So we're also going to have our panel discussion, which will be led by our moderator, Michael Jenga. And then we're going to have, after the panel discussion, we will have the official launch of the competition regulation, the conference. But I wanted our guest of honor to also be introduced before that. And 1 more minute, as I request you all to put your responses in the chat, and we So I'm informed that our guest of honor is online, and I want to thank you and welcome you, the Right Honorable Rebecca Alitola Kadaga. And before we proceed, Honorable Minister, I just want to introduce the keynote speaker for the day. And our keynote speaker is Ms. Julian Mwihire, who is the Director, Economic Regulation, Content and Consumer Affairs at the Uganda Communications Commission. She has over 20 years experience in the field of telecommunications and communication regulation, and has been instrumental in shaping regulatory frameworks that promote fair competition and protect consumer rights across the communications sector. Julian has a master's degree in telecommunications management, specializing in global innovations. She began her career at MTN Uganda, where she managed the wholesale and career function for 13 years, then joined Global Systems for Mobile Communications Association as Director Data and Insights for Mobile for Development based in Nairobi. And throughout her various roles in these organizations, she has successfully led initiatives that enhanced competition, fostered innovation, and ensured equitable access to service for all consumers. We all know that UCC has been at the helm of regulating competition in the media and communications industry in the country and the telecoms. And for a long time, they've been the authority on competition regulation and consumer protection. And she has been there for this long. Julian believes that informed consumers are the backbone of a sustained economy. And in her role at the UCC, she's committed to leveraging data-driven insights and encouraging customer-centric investment efforts, as well as strategic partnerships that promote a dynamic marketplace. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman herself, Julian Mwihire, who is delivering our keynote. Julian, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Fiona. I hope you can see me. Not sure about the light in my office.
We can see you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Fiona, for the kind introduction. And thank you so much to Fidelis Leadership Institute for the very warm invitation to share on a subject that is core to the UCC, as you've mentioned, but also very critical in the aspects of competition and obviously regulation. Today, I've been invited to present on a topic of understanding the role of regulation in the marketplace. And if time permits, because this is really a wide subject, if time permits, I will just talk briefly about dominance, although you can't speak about competition without speaking about dominance and also market fairness. I will share my screen because I'll just have just a few slides that I will present. I don't know if you can see can you see my screen, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll take off my video in the meantime. All right. And so really, the UCC draws its mandate to regulate the communication sector that includes telco broadcasting, multimedia, and the postal sector from the Act of 2013. And within this act, there are a number of provisions that address competition, as well as tools that the Commission is empowered with to ensure that there is competition within these markets. It should be noted, however, that whereas I may make reference directly today to the communication sector, the key objectives and principles of competition regulation are comparable across various sectors, including the electricity, water, and other utilities sectors, with our main objective to balance the interests of consumers, commercial operations, as well as national aspirations. And these objectives are achieved through regulating tariffs, approving investment plans, consumer protection measures, and a lot that I think Fiona has already spoken about. In an era like ours today that is marked with rapid technological advancements and globalization, dynamics of competition are constantly evolving. And as regulators, our challenge is to ensure that the frameworks we implement not only guard against anti-competitive practices, but also foster an environment where innovation and consumer protections thrive. And there are two key concepts that we're speaking about today: the issue of competition and the issue of regulation, or what we also want to call market oversight. I know a lot of people, when they talk about regulators, sometimes, they have this notion that it's, policing. But really, if we speak about it and think about it as a concept of market oversight, I think it becomes clearer in as far as what our role is as regulators. So I'd like to explore these two elements and touch briefly also on the implications of market dominance, if time permits. So what is regulation? Or let's start with competition. Competition focuses on the understanding of the market, the behavior of operations, and also market outcomes. It is feedback that influences regulators to design effective regulation or market oversight frameworks, policies, or even regulatory adjustments where necessary. And so really competition is a desirable outcome. Regulation, on the other hand, involves the development and the use of necessary frameworks, tools, data insights, resources allocations, enforcement measures, among others, to enhance transparency and accountability in the marketplace. Regulation ensures that organizations operate ethically and in alignment with established guidelines, thereby safeguarding public interest and maintaining market integrity and promoting efficiency. Regulation plays a critical role in fostering market stability to promote the overall health of the sector for broader economic and social objectives. It is therefore important to note, and I think this is something that we'll see throughout my conversation here today, that competition and market oversight or regulation are iterative, meaning that they inform and they influence each other so as to achieve a desirable outcome. And I'll show you how this is exactly done. But let's first look at competition factors. What are they? And competition factors refer to the elements that provide an understanding of the behavior of operations, consumers, and the market. And these factors help regulators identify what these influences are of competition or lack thereof, and the opportunities, and help to also develop strategies to address competition challenges. And basically, we can go through the various factors and what the influences or what these signs are. Because, as when you're talking about competition and it being a desirable outcome, there are certain signs in the market or certain influences in the market that help us as regulators to be able to determine whether there is a problem or whether there is actually true competition. And the first one is the issue of market concentration and penetration. And really the influences here that we look out for as regulators is one, whether they're few or dominant players, whether there is high market share or even high market concentration, and whether there are barriers to entry. And those typical signs help us as regulators to take the necessary action using the tools that I'll share with you in subsequent slides on how to address market concentration. Also market share and market power, market structure and market power. And these are, when we speak about dominance, so we speak about significant market power, and these are all defined within, all competition laws that you would probably get your hands on. And this is really not only specific to the communication sector. Market shares of 35%, in our context, it's actually 25%, or a market share of 65% is a sign that there could be a problem, or maybe not. Could just be the nature of this of the market. But these are some of the tests that we carry out that help us to further advance in our research or in our investigations to see if these kinds of market structures are a problem to competition or not. And market structures that have an influence on market products availability, if there's product hoarding, if there is anything to do with the quality, consumer choice, pricing power, again here, barriers to entry, exclusive dealings or tying arrangements that prevent, other entities from entering the market. So a lot of these are signs and symptoms or influences of competition that we look out for. Product differentiation, limited product differentiation and limited innovation is also one of those typical signs of issues to do with competition. Service affordability, lack of competitive pricing, collusion behavior, predatory pricing. Again, these are all influences that we typically look out for in competition assessments. Device adoption, and this is really typical to the communication sector. Demand, availability, affordability. If you're looking at a perfectly competitive market, you'll find that a lot of these have been addressed, dealt with, and really the symptoms and signs of issues to do with competition is when you start looking at having substandard, illegitimate, or even legitimate devices, if that's a typical highly competitive market. Market growth, evolution, and innovation is also one of the factors of competition. And some of the influences or the signs that we look out for is service reliability, service availability, the quality of service in the market through some of the QoS tests that we carry out, network performance, innovation, infrastructure rollout and penetration, compliance with standards, and other elements of social responsibility that have become really commonplace, through some of the ESG processes that we implement. Other factors include operator conduct or even distress. And some of the signs that we test for as regulators are issues to do with transparency and discriminatory conduct, declining quality of service, increased debt, as we see, increased consumer complaints, loss of subscribers, loss of revenues, declining service quality, and the likes. And really, we can go through a lot of these factors, but I think it's important for us to understand them because there are different tests that regulators carry out on all these different factors to test also from some of the signs that the market demonstrates to us or even the operators through their own data. And I think it's important for us to appreciate them before we get into the actual elements of regulation as they are. So consumer behavior, if we start seeing the market growing with a lot of complaints, fraud is also one of the signs of ineffective competition and low levels of service adoption. Entry and exit barriers, and these could be also signs to do with capital requirements. Heavy capital requirements are entry barriers, and that's a typical sign of lack of competitiveness. Regulatory barriers themselves, if you have ineffective or outdated regulations, that themselves can be a problem. to competition, issues to do with brand affinity. And then when we start seeing a lot more mergers and acquisitions, you know, when we have very few players or we start seeing markets collapsing, increased market power could be a result or an outcome of that kind of activity. We start seeing issues to do with workforce reduction, you know, reduced options in terms of operations, and then elements to do with, or factors to do with external dependency. When we start seeing issues to do with supplier power growing, or even supply chain disruptions, government policies that are not reviewed, or the government policies that are created without consultation with the sector to which they apply, you know, rapid technology change, political instability, all those are signs sometimes that have a direct impact or influence on competition. So while we're looking at competition, and as mentioned, that competition and regulation are really iterative, I think it's important for us to also discuss what we do as regulators to be able to address, you know, some of these findings or signs that come out into the market as far as competition is concerned. So our market oversight function, you know, refers to monitoring, supervision, and the control of operator activities by developing the use of necessary frameworks, tools, data insights, again, resource allocations, and enforcement measures to ensure fair competition, protection of customers, and promotion of efficiencies. And there are various ways that, as a regulator, this can be done. And one of our first, I would think, should be the most effective tool, should be licensing and also compliance monitoring. And licensing allows regulators to control who enters the market, to ensure that only qualified and capable entities are permitted to operate through effective diligence measures and licensing standards that include technical capabilities, financial stability, help to ensure that players provide a minimum level of service. And regulators can issue a number of licenses to promote competition or to even reduce the risk of monopolistic behavior. And here what we're saying is that as regulators, you should really let, you know, a free flow in the market. But however, ensuring that the entities that come into the market don't come in to actually cause disruption or poor quality of service, but ensure that the entities that do operate into the market through the licensing frameworks that are in place are able to compete, but are also able to provide the level of service that is expected. Also, policies, regulations, frameworks, and guidelines are tools that the regulators use to ensure that there are standardized methods of operating by operators so as to ensure fairness in the market, transparency, and efficiency. And these policies, among others, could include consumer protection policies, anti-competition policies, and others even related to innovation as a way to ensure that we have full oversight over the industry. Resource allocation is also one of the tools that regulators use to limit or to even ensure that there are no barriers of entry to new players. And misallocation or allocation can create either a fair or unfair concentration of resources in the market, and can promote or even not a level playing field for operators. So regulators, one of their key roles is to ensure that resource allocation is done fairly and is done appropriately to ensure that we don't create you know, unnecessary significant market power or dominance to operators, particularly in cost-heavy businesses like the ones in the communication space. If you notice, in Uganda, we have you know, few on the telco side, we've got few players who actually utilize resources, and these are usually like the mobile operators. And the reason why is because these are very cost-heavy businesses. But you find on the broadcasting side, where we do also have policies for resource allocation, we've got over 300 radio stations, for example, in Uganda. And what this has done on the radio side, it has created a huge level of competition, but in a lot of ways, there are challenges with that as well. So finding the right balance, especially in a market that is very cost heavy or cost moderate, is very essential when it comes to allocating of resources for use in that sector. So inefficient allocations can directly impact the ability of operators to offer high quality services and limit also innovation advancements and competitive pricing. And this is something that I've mentioned now related to some of the markets that we operate or that we have oversight over, and where some resource allocations have actually created even an issue to do with pricing competitiveness because of the numbers of players that exist in those markets. Also numbering resources. So here in resources, it's not only about spectrum, but numbering resources also ensure efficient competition. And assignment of these numbers would ensure and promote optimal use to avoid wastage, but also to avoid the issue of refusal to entry or refusal to exit. And some of the tools that regulators use here is like number portability, as a way to ensure that number resources are not used to tie down consumers, as a way to limit levels of competition. Another tool that we use as part of our oversight function is market definition and power assessments. And this includes monitoring market structures regularly and in identifying market bottlenecks and analyzing market competition. And here our role is aimed at establishing appropriate rules and frameworks to promote entry and fair competition. And it involves conducting analysis that identifies, how markets have changed, the trends, the players, and market failures. And in a lot of ways, when you have this kind of study carried out, a market definition study, it's always followed up with a complete licensing review framework, for example. I don't know if a lot of you noticed, if you have been following the workings of the Commission in 2020, 2021, we had a complete licensing review, which brought on board the national telecom operators in really affecting the broadband policy. And this was an outcome of a market definition exercise that was carried out by the Commission when we started realizing that entities like Airtel, which had a completely different licensing category than MTN, were pretty much, the two entities were playing in the same field, offering the same service. And so it was necessary through this process to bring them to the same licensing category. So these are all exercises that we carry out, the market definition exercise and power assessment exercises, to determine whether our frameworks are effective, to determine whether entities that are offering the same service are actually within or are actually measured within the same level of licensing and obligations as the case would be. So that's really something that we do continuously to ensure competition. And then another tool that we use, and this is really one of our critical tools, is a cost and referencing pricing determination. And the goal here is to ensure that there is, and the goal here is to ensure that service providers are providing services at cost plus. And really the function is to ensure that the prices reflect the true cost of service. And really, this is something very critical, especially when you're talking about players that have significant market power or players that are dominant within the market that have control over pricing structures. We use the costing and reference pricing determinations to set prices for these entities, to ensure that there is no exploitation of consumers in the market, both at a retail and also at a wholesale level. And really, this is one of the most critical tools that regulators use to ensure reasonableness of pricing, to even avoid predatory pricing. So it's not only exploitation of pricing, but even predatory pricing, as a way to keep other entities out of the market. Coverage and service penetration obligations. This could be maybe unique to the communication sector, maybe other utility sector as well. I don't know if this would be very relevant to other markets, but the goal here is to ensure equitable distribution of services that are delivered, and we set obligations to ensure that nobody is left behind. In markets, especially where there's not enough competition, or because of various factors, and sometimes these factors have to do with cost, the regulator has got to set hefty obligations not to limit services to only areas that are economically viable. Like in Uganda, our national telecom operators have an obligation to cover 90% of the geographic area of the country, and we ensure that the resources that we give them are tied to these obligations. If left to their own will, I would say, some of these national telecom operators would probably only have services and concentration of services only in the areas where they would probably be able to make profits. But one of our rules and one of our roles as regulators, as part of the obligations of these entities, is to ensure that coverage and service penetration is tied to some of the resources that we give them, and these resources are very critical for their own operations. So those are some of the tools that we use. Billing and metering, assurance, and this is really one of the tools we use, again, to ensure that certain standards are maintained in the provision of metered services, both on the wholesale and the retail side. And this helps in resolving consumer billing complaints and rebate assurance. And really, this is to ensure that customers regain trust in some of the services that the operators have within the market. One of our other tools that we use, obviously, on the dispute management, arbitration and mediation, and this really involves resolving conflicts and disputes by offering parties means to ensure that they're able to resolve their conflicts without having to go the full way or the full legal way, where we're able to help them address some of the conflicts with the use of the law. So it's important to note that competition and regulation, like I said, are interdependent, and with each informing and influencing the other to achieve a desirable market outcome. And really, it should be pointed out that competition can act as a substitute for regulation in many cases. When markets are competitive and functioning well, the need for extensive regulation or intervention can be reduced. It is therefore in such cases that competition can be relied on to discipline market behavior and ensure effective or efficient outcomes. So we look at competition as an outcome, and we don't look at competition as something that would ensure even the functioning of the sector. All activities within the regulator should be measured against the influence of competition, and that's exactly how we look at it within the UCC. And anything that we approve for execution, we first measure it against a desirable outcome or its impact on competition. There are some misconceptions, even with some of us economists, that regulation and competition are opposing or contrasting perspectives. And these should be addressed and cleared out. And I trust that this session and the comparison between the factors of competition and the functions of regulation of oversight will help us to see that one is actually a symptom and the other one is a tool that can be used to address the influences of the other. So balancing regulation and competition requires a thoughtful approach that considers the needs of consumers and the overall market environment. The ongoing process requires for us to be adaptable, collaborative, and vigilant to respond to ever evolving market conditions. So as regulators, what do we do to balance competition and regulation? Because in a lot of ways, this might sound like, it's something that it's something we do every single day. But it might sound like we've got, like a machine that we plug in, the market concentration, and it gives us a result of what we expect to do in terms of our oversight function. However, we do notice that, as regulators, there is so much that we have to ensure that we keep in mind when we're balancing regulation and competition. And the first one is feedback. We need to be able to have a loop within the market where we need to adjust our frameworks, address our challenges, and also ensure that there is development of new frameworks regularly. We're in an era of technological disruption, and sometimes our traditional modes of regulation can't hold. And some of these are actually disruptive in their own way in terms of competition. So we need to listen to the market, and really these symptoms and signs that I showed earlier, or these factors of competition, are our good ears to ensure that either some of the frameworks that we have are not effective, or even some of the laws as they are not effective. I'll give you a very simple example. The definition.
Julian, I'm giving you like 5 minutes, so you can wind up.
Yes, I'll be winding up. I'll give you a very simple example. Our definition in the law of broadcasters are entities that use spectrum or national resources to be able to put out messaging to the public. However, we see an emerging trend of broadcasters who are now, influencers on social media. These had never been considered, for example, within the law, as it were. And so it's important that regulators continue to update some of these laws so that everybody can be on the same playing field in as far as service offering is concerned. We also need to be very adaptable. I think I've mentioned that. We need to be able to adapt to the changing market conditions as new competitors enter the market. We need to improve continuously and learn from market behavior. We need to monitor the market and evaluate it, with its changes and competitive dynamics. And this includes constantly, tracking market share, pricing behavior, because these are the really clear signs of competition. We need to be innovative as regulators. We also need to invest heavily in incentives like sandboxing to be able to understand the new developments in the market. And one of the ways that I believe is we need to leverage data. Data is everything, because we believe that what cannot be measured cannot be monitored. We need to be, one of our key areas of strength as a commission, I would say, is our ability to collect data and utilize it to be able to make right decisions. And obviously collaboration. Achieving the right balance of regulation requires collaboration with very many stakeholders, businesses, consumers, and having an open dialogue is essential for understanding the challenges, especially faced within the market. And really, if I look at, and I think this is really a summary of what I've been discussing today. When we're speaking about regulation and speaking about competition, there are really, one is an influence on the other. We can never have, a question that will be able to be posed and say, is there ineffective regulation without having, without considering the impacts on competition, for example? And can you have, influences of competition without having effective market oversight functions? And I think the way we look at it in the commission is that we have to look at it as iterative. I think, Fiona, as I'd said, I knew I'd run out of time before I get into issues to do with market dominance and fairness. But I think in a lot of ways, I've also discussed them because these are some of the symptoms of competition that we've discussed today. Thank you very much, and I'll wait for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. That was a very interesting presentation, a keynote from an authority of the authority. And I want to thank you so much for your insights. And I'm glad that you still have a lot more in your kitty via dominance, because we will have a more detailed conversation about that in the panel. And also, I'm sure some people have questions here. If you have a question for Julian, this is a moment for you to ask to just put up your hand and ask a question. However, I'd also like to encourage you to share some more questions in the chat and comments. There's a very long comment from Stephen Namuza responding to an earlier question, but Julian, just a quick one from the aspect of the regulator's role. You hinted on it, but while there is, and I think I said that earlier in my introduction, while there's no problem with monopolies, how do, especially in the wake of regionalization, growing competition, how do regulators avoid sometimes, not sometimes, but it has been said that regulation sometimes is made for the already established and those that are there. If what we saw recently with DSTV to Starlink, but I think that this is unkept. Have you heard me, Julian?
Sorry, Fiona, you were breaking. I actually didn't hear the question. I don't know if it's just me. Just, can you say that again?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me now, Julian?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes, I was saying that how can regulators protect the market while letting free market forces work, and also ensure that even when there are monopolies, there's no abuse. And we've had a lot of people having issues about the recent issue with DSTV and the memo that was issued about it. Is there a way that you can explain the regulator's perspective on this angle?
Sure, yeah. Would you like me to wait for a couple of more questions, or we can take this one?
We can take this as I look for more questions. I'm looking. We can take this for now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. And I think I want to respond to this question, also from a context of a completely different industry. For example, like Umeme. Well, I think Umeme is still functioning. I think let's look at it, as an example, where Umeme sets their standards, for example, on the use of very specific devices, for power. And we have a case where an importer decides that they have a tool or they have a device that is cheaper for the market, maybe more affordable, and they want to insist to the regulator that, this device should be used and not the device that Umeme has set standards for, and these standards have been approved. So this is almost like the case like DSTV. When DSTV came into the market, one of the products that they had locked in at an international level was the issue of the Premier League. And this is, I think this is really where much of the complaints is coming from. And to be able to deliver some of their services using satellite and how they have been licensed, there was a very strict standard in terms of the devices that they were using to be able to deliver their I would say their service. And this was approved by the commission, and this was known by the industry. So when you have a situation like this as a regulator, where an entity has invested heavily in this kind of service, and this is known because of the exclusivity, and this exclusivity is not secured, you know, within the country, within our jurisdiction, as a mode of you know, of heavy investment, I would say. We have to make sure that we respect those kinds of boundaries, and really it comes to the issue again of the kind of devices that they were using to deliver this service. You know, generally, this would not be, you know, a case. We have situations like CNN that has opened up and have allowed all players to be able to broadcast this service, and we know this from a lot of the copyright rules that have been signed internationally. However, when you have a situation like with DSTV, where the entity that owns the rights has said they want to only work with that one entity, and that entity should be able to distribute this service across the different countries that they operate, I think within our jurisdiction we have to respect that. However, and I want to say this, however, some of these can be dealt with, you know, through various other forms of regulation within the country, where if we, as a country, would like to break up these kinds of exclusivities, we would have to do it at an international level. And what that would do is that at a global level, the exclusivity that is signed by the MultiChoice Group, in this case, would have to be broken. But these are decisions that have to be approved by all the different entities or all the different countries that are participating in this exercise. So this is a very tricky one, because this exclusivity is not, you know, only about Uganda, but when we are dealing with, you know, with global business decisions, you know, we have to protect our own local entity. And this is really some of the decisions that were being made here. But I brought in the example of Umeme, because we do see cases where, you know, we went into, you know, a mode of type approving, for example, you know, gadgets or that are being used for free to air. And we find ourselves in a situation where where other entities feel like it's anti-competitive for the commission to dictate, you know, certain standards of devices, and are insisting that the market should open up and allow for all manner of devices, which, you know, sometimes don't consider the quality of service being delivered. And sometimes some of these standards have to be set. They have to be set to ensure that the customer enjoys the level of service that they have paid for. The customer ensures that, you know, their service is up all the time. And so in setting some of these boundaries by a regulator is really to make sure that the customer is protected. So if you allow anyone to show a service that has not been approved onto that platform, when the customer has a problem, where do they go, you know? And so this is really where a lot of the decisions are made, from more from a customer-centric perspective, but not necessarily to impact competition as may be misinterpreted. Fiona, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, very clearly. Thank you. There are some questions in the chat. If you don't mind, do you mind just clicking on the chat and going through them?
Yeah.
If I read them, I'll just take more time.
Yeah. How is it? Okay.
Oh, I can read them for everyone. One is from Juliet Nsima. What are the points of action on regulating future technology media tools that are manipulated by artificial intelligence and machine learning? I don't know whether you got that. How do you regulate?
I'm not a technical person, but Juliet, I'm very happy to provide a response to this. I'll put my email in the chat just now. I'll get my technical team to provide the right responses, but certainly one of the things that we're working on is coming up with standards in as far as AI and machine learning are concerned. And this is something that I know that our team is working on. So, but let me not add anything to that because again, I'm not a technical person.
Okay, I think that also comes to Kenneth Mukama's question on leveraging data. Or that's different, I think.
Yeah,
How is
that's
UCC leveraging data to enhance enforcement of competition law currently? That is one. The second one is a compliment from Anthea, from Dr. Anthea, saying you covered a lot of ground in a short time. And then thirdly, Jerry Cariho asks whether it is possible to forecast imminent failure of a player to operate in the market amidst the prevailing challenges of the economy before it ends in premium tiers and high tech for investors. What measures has the regulator put to foresee this and curb it before it gets ugly? So those two questions for now.
okay. Thank you. How is UCC leveraging data to enhance the enforcement of competition laws? I think, Kenneth, everything that I've mentioned, especially on the factors of competition, we actually use data to be able to assess each and every factor there. When we're measuring market concentration, for example, when we're measuring nothing to do with pricing, when we're measuring investment capabilities, we only use, or we mostly use data. The UCC collects quite a bit of data, both from operators through an obligation for them to provide, their operational data to us. Operational, meaning their financial and non-financial data. And we use this, through our own measures to be able to see whether there are not only levels to do with profitability, but also levels to do with, their own performance. We also have access to their, the consumer complaint dumps, for example, which they provide to us every single month, to be able to see where are the customers leaning in as far as elements of competition are concerned. Are there massive disputes? Are there issues to do with the accessibility of services or not? And some of these are all from the various data points that we have. Recently, we published an annual Communications Commission report. I think you saw that late last year. And that's really one of the ways we can give back to the community on all the different data that we collect from the industry through various means. We've got actual direct access into their networks where we collect data to do with their operations, but not consumer or subscriber information, just to make that clear. This is really to do with their operations, the traffic that they have. What is the location of this traffic? Are they offering quality of service in Kampala, for example, that's different from the quality of service in Gulu? And these are all from the data points that we collect from them. So we use that data to measure, first of all, the competition and also enforce through the various functions that I shared with you. And these functions could be related to pricing, determinations, or like setting reference prices by the commission, or we even give penalties, if in some cases we see that there is abuse of position. And a lot of this, I would say, Kenneth, that the bulk of what we consider is actually data. There's a question on is it possible to forecast imminent failure? Absolutely. We do have, in one of our functions, I think I've shared, is that we have distress tools that we use to be able to measure, potential failure of an entity. And we actually, in many ways, much as this is obviously not something that the market would see, is that we try to help mitigate some of these failures. And a lot of the data that we collect is actually a good way to measure the distress of an operator. One, even very simple measures like growth in subscribers, levels of investment, growth of, or even in other words, reduction in complaints from the market, quality of service. These are all triggers for potential failure. And we monitor every single operation in our market, all our licensees on a daily, monthly, weekly basis. And we do have flags of some of the data points that we need to focus on to be able to understand whether there's a potential challenge that is going to happen in the market in regards to an operator, whether there's something that we can do to address some of these concerns. We have in many cases tried to intervene either through cost reduction, maybe resource reduction, which could be a problem for them, or even support them in understanding whether there are certain obligations that are maybe too heavy for them to take on, and help them to be able to grow into those obligations. Very quickly, one of our new licensing framework, I would say attributes is that it can help an operator grow into from a regional operator to a national operator. In many ways, that helps even these operators manage their cost of doing business. Another way we can help mitigate some of these costs is infrastructure sharing, and that way can reduce on the capex that is required. A lot of our interventions in this case are helping to keep operations alive. Obviously, it's not easy to compete within a market like ours, but we do measure for failure or distress of all operations regularly. I would say it's one of our key roles, especially within the economic regulation function.
Thank you, Julian. I think what I'm going to request, because we have a panel and then we have a guest of honor who's also waiting, I'm going to request that you, if you have a few more minutes, if you don't mind typing a few of the responses that you can, because I see very good questions from Michael Njenga, from Gerald, from Stephen Nahumuza, that are very, very pertinent. So if you don't mind, so that we don't lose it in the whole email conversation, you could type some responses here as we welcome the next panel. Everyone, please send some love to Julian as we thank her for a fantastic presentation. Julian, I'm sure the Right Honorable Speaker will want to say something about your presentation, so I hope you'll stay online because we really want to see what she says about that. Thank you so much, Julian, for your presentation. You did a fantastic job and you've taken us to school. So please, if you don't mind, just type a few responses in the chat. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce to you our panel moderator for the day, Mr. Michael Njenga, who's the Senior Legal Officer, Regulation and Drafting at the Insurance Regulatory Authority of Uganda. He's also a proud alumni of the FLI COMESA Competition Regulation and Consumer Protection Training. And he is an advocate of the High Court of the Republic of Uganda with 9 years of experience in active legal practice in commercial law, consumer protection, policy formulation, and legislative drafting. He's also a Commissioner of Oaths and Notary Public. And yes, he is here to moderate a fantastic panel of eminent members whom I will let him introduce. Michael, you're very welcome. And just to be clear, you have about 35 minutes for your panel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you for the generous introduction. Yeah, I'm truly honored and excited to moderate this panel because there are so many experts here in the topic. Julian just highlighted the role of the regulators in ensuring fair market competition. So I will introduce my panel. Our panel today is full of experts in this area. And we have 3 panel discussants. I'll introduce Mr. Sam Watasa, who has served as a board member of the East African Community Competition Authority. He's currently the chairperson of the Technical Petroleum Committee and also the vice chairperson of the COMESA Competition Commission. Mr. Sam Watasa is also the chairperson, the executive director of the Consumer Association of Uganda, the Consumer Protection Association of Uganda. Then our second panelist is Dr. Anthea Paelo. Dr. Anthea is an economist with a decade of experience in financial sector development. I will request our panelists if you could just put on your video as we introduce you. When you're going to speak, you can just put up your video so that everyone can see you in this webinar and interact with you as you present or as you respond to our questions. So Dr. Anthea is currently the policy specialist for competition and digital financial services at the Alliance for Financial Inclusion. She's previously the intervention manager for business environment and gender focal persons at Financial Sector Deepening Uganda. And she works on initiatives to improve the financial access and market conditions. So she has a wide experience in financial inclusion in our markets. Then she also holds a PhD in economics from the University of Johannesburg with a doctorate research focusing on competitive dynamics in mobile financial services in Kenya and Uganda specifically. The third panelist is Mr. Kaja Timothy, my own colleague. He's a sports lawyer in Uganda. He's a FIFA licensed agent and a badge sports safeguarding officer. And I must say he just recently won a very big case in sports law. Timothy is a lecturer of law at Uganda Christian University, Kampala International University, and Chambogo University. And he majors in sports law in those universities. He's also the first author of a book on sports law in Eastern Central Africa. Timothy is a partner at FITIM Advocates and entertainment. This is a law firm and an entertainment firm. He's the managing director at Discovery Sports, a sports business firm. He has served as a legal officer at KCCA Football Club. He worked on a number of high-profile sports projects and instructions, and we hope that he's going to give us that experience because there is a lot of competition discussion going on in the sports sector. Now, he's also a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and specifically specializing in sports arbitration. He recently represented Fahad Bayo, who is the first Ugandan to win a case at the FIFA tribunal against a European club. So we hope that he will give us that experience. So these are our panelists, and I want to go on straight to the questions because we don't have much time. I will start with our own, Mr. Sam Watasa, who has practiced competition and consumer protection in this region, in both the COMESA, EAC, and also in Uganda. Because Sam Watasa, we have engaged together in discussions coming up with the competition laws in Uganda and even the regulation that is underway. So I would like Mr. Sam Watasa to give us a brief highlight of competition law and consumer protection, using your experience from the ESC, the COMESA Competition Commission, and of course, as the ED of the Consumer Protection Association, we would like you to give us an overview of competition law and consumer protection, and how policy and regulation can be used to ensure fair markets in a fair and competitive market. Mr. Watasa.
Thank you, Michael. I'm unable to put on video because as I speak, I'm in a health facility, but yeah, I'll just go ahead and make my remarks on the subject. I know that the foundation for this discussion originates from reference to an exclusive agreement. So I'll simply put quick remarks around the core of regulating competition. I know market regulation is a much broader subject and encompasses beyond competition regulation.
Hi, how are you?
Julian has talked a lot about the sector that is regulated by UCC, and there are a number of these concepts.
Okay.
But I will go on the broad aspect. First of all, the different competition laws literally are about the same on broad aspects of them. So what are the possible key elements of a competition regime? Usually we will cover anti-competitive business practices, and that is about horizontal agreements, vertical agreements, and abuse of market dominance. And then the other aspect is regulation of mergers and acquisitions. And then the third broad aspect of typical competition regulation is about consumer protection, that largely deals with false and misleading misrepresentations, unconscionable conduct, product safety, and standards. Some examples have already been given by Julian on this, and then product information on those very standards. So when we are dealing with aspects then of those horizontal agreements, what do they look like, or what we call horizontal restraints? So typical horizontal restraints refer to agreements or practices between competitors at the same level of supply chain that restrict competition. Of course, we know what happens when you restrict competition is that firms don't join that particular sector or industry, or exit is restricted by some measures. Now, some of these measures might be market measures, or they might be statutory measures. Our own Competition Act covers both private, which is market-driven, and also statutory. So the undertakings that are governed by this may be independent or potential competitors. Sometimes these are things that firms discuss prior to entry into the market. They could be at production level. For instance, you could have companies that produce the same product, like sugar, or even production of chicken, or their products coming together to create an agreement that constrains entry. Or you could have them at the distribution chain level. And at the distribution chain level, this particular one is at the heart of the super sport that has just been mentioned. Or is it Premier League, whatever it is, because this is an exclusive agreement, and that is covered under competition regulation. Now,
yes, in 1 minute, Mr. Watasa.
Yeah, so you have those horizontal agreements, as I said, you can detect them through price fixing, market allocation, collusive tendering and bid rigging, output restriction, customer allocation. For instance, you can say Uganda has been allocated to a particular company because they have an exclusive agreement. And then what we do in competition really, especially, is to define what we call the relevant market. So generally, a market cannot just be defined generically. When we are assessing a market for abuse of market dominance or violation of competition regulation and policy, we look at the relevant market. What it means simply is, what is the possibility of having substitutes to products of the farms that you are assessing? I can even reference the issue of devices that are being used. So if we set a standard for devices, is that standard exclusive to a particular supplier? Or is this standard for the device open for other competitors to use that particular device so that they can compete in that market? So for instance, if I use this particular example, and we are looking at premiership as tied to a particular device, I'm using this example because it's more live now, that we would then have to look at the relevant market for premiership. Are the viewers able to find another service or another game or set of competition within the sports industry that is a substitute to the premiership? Should there be such a substitute that is effective, then you would not say that that exclusive agreement violates the basic tenets of competition law and therefore has an effect on consumers. We have a number of these, especially in the what we call hail taxi cab industry, Ubers and whatever. They have exclusive agreements with the people that own vehicles. But if you have your vehicle on Uber, then you can't have it on Bolt. But then if Bolt is an effective competitor with Uber, then you can't say that exclusive agreement has a negative impact on the relevant market and therefore the consumers. I will end there.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Watasa. I will just take it on from there and go straight to Timothy Kaja. Recently, you had a very big case in this space of sports, and I just wanted you to give us an experience of the role of, what do you think, in your opinion, the role of governing sports bodies? What role should they play in ensuring?
Yes, Michael, you seem to have gone off.
Yes, Timothy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, I just wanted us to discuss, in your view, the role of sports governing bodies. How should they ensure fair markets in the realm of sports?
All right. Thank you, Michael, my fellow panelists, and keynote speaker and guest of honor, and of course, the persons that are spending this morning with us. In the world of sport, what we need to appreciate that there are two key principles that drive the issue of competition and regulation. And this is one, sports autonomy, in that in the sports world, they wish to do their things their way. And the justification for this is, number two, is specificity doctrine, saying that the things in sport are specific to them. So what applies in sport may not apply anywhere. So the roles that these bodies play is to make sure that, one, they preserve that autonomy while paying attention to the issues that are specific to sport. And in there, they'll choose two items. One is that they'll look at some aspects or items that purely sport in nature. Let's say the rules of the games, how to score a goal, who gets a card, what does the card mean, and that they'll say that is not affected by competition law. In that you cannot say, if someone says that our league will have, like the Uganda Premier League has 16 clubs, that is the rule of the game, then you can also say that other clubs have been unfairly affected by the competition, by excluding them from competing in that given league. And then there are the items that they consider not to be specifically of a sporting nature. One that has often been mentioned already here is sports broadcasting, and then the agreements that they have. So in sports broadcasting, they would say that they're open to competition either way. But in practice, you find that, like I already mentioned, leagues that have a dominant position, like the Premier League, would want to give their rights to one person, and the argument is that that is how it makes business sense. Then the other way that they come in is now with the regulating the relationship between the clubs and their players, because the players would want to ply their trade anywhere, and yet the clubs would want to have those players only playing for them. Or Mr. Summers was giving us an example of the Uber drivers. When Uber says, if you signed up your vehicle with Uber, don't sign up with Safecar. Same thing, the clubs will say that if you signed up for KCCA, we don't want you playing for Vipers. And that is now how the regulators come in, that before any contract is registered with them, of course, for it to be valid in sport, it must be registered with the regulator. So before any contract is registered with them, they want to make sure that you do not have it anywhere. That's, for example, if your car is registered with Bolt, they want to make sure that it's not on the Safecar app or the Uber app. That's how they look at it. So that way they try to balance to see that the item that we're dealing with, is it specific of a sporting nature? If the answer is yes, they'll play blind to the competition law and everything, antitrust. But if it is open and it's not purely of a sporting nature, then they'll say no. Here we must respect antitrust law. What we've seen from other players, let's say in Europe, the leagues themselves have found that there are people who are countering them. We've heard of the European Super League that is coming in, so that no, we cannot let UEFA be the only organizer of the top European prize in football, which is the UEFA Champions League. We also want to create a separate league. Now you may find that their hands are cut short. And what they will do is that they'll say, if any of you violates our rules, then we won't license you. That way they keep their club enclosed. And you could say probably in our world, in Uganda, probably even in the larger part of Europe and the rest of the world, that is fair. But if you go to the Americas, they have what they call a franchise system, where for them, not anyone, because here in Uganda, let's say you have 16 clubs, yes, they are cut out from any competition within their league. But at the end of the league, there will be promotion and relegation. But when you cross over to the Americas, there is no promotion or relegation. The league stays enclosed. And it's the role of the regulators to make sure that there is no other parallel league that has been created. But of course, the question would be that you could look at these things as private arrangements. And then the question would be, in the public sense, outside of the big club, of the big boys and the big girls, how else would the state come in? We've seen that the states, instead of promoting the competition in that part of the sports sector, they instead underscore that position. When you look at our new Sports Act of Uganda that came out in 2023, it also underscores the position that only one sports association will take charge of a sports discipline. So you'd ask yourself, how does that rhyme well with the competition law? And you find that for the better part of it, competition, the rules that respect competition and antitrust governance will be locked out in the sporting world, except for items that they don't consider to be purely of a sporting nature.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Timothy Kaja. I will now move on to Dr. Anthea. I think Timothy just kicked it off in the sports discussion, this competition in the sports realm, which is kind of a debate in all over the world. Now, Dr. Anthony, as a digital finance expert, I just wanted us to discuss the challenges. What challenges have you faced, do you see in ensuring competition in the digital financial ecosystem? And how can competition policy help to mitigate especially market dominance in digital financial platforms? Yes, Dr. Anthea, I don't know if she's with us.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Must be my mic. Saying greetings to everyone. Thank you so much to our guest of honor. Thank you so much to our hosts, Fidelis, and thank you so much to our panelists. Just to get into the question that you've asked, as you know, mobile money has taken off has been quite the phenomenon here in Uganda and the rest of East Africa, and has brought with it a lot of benefit in terms of increased access to financial services, in terms of increased convenience of financial services. But what we'll find that is unique with mobile money and a lot of digital financial services is that not a lot of providers can survive comfortably in this market. And one of the reasons for this is that something that we call network economies or network externalities. What this means is that if you're an MTN person, for instance, if you're someone who uses MTN, you're most likely to call or make use of services that are on MTN. You'd be very hard pressed to move to another provider, especially if that is the first service that you accessed. If you're on Airtel, you'll most probably continue using Airtel. You'll find, for instance, that we maybe just 3-4 years ago, we had other providers in the market, such as Africell. We also had M-Center, if you remember. There were other providers in the market, but because they came in much later in the market, much later in the economy, it was very hard for them to access customers. A lot of the customers had already moved or adopted use of other of the key providers that entered the market, MTN, Airtel, and so on and so forth. So what that means is that it became very difficult for other providers to successfully enter the market. Even if so that is one of the key challenges with markets such as digital financial services. It is important who enters the market first. So it's very easy for the first incumbents or the first movers into the market quickly get market share and quickly get dominance. What I'd want to say is that dominance per se is not there's nothing wrong with dominance. The challenge comes in when providers in the market abuse that dominance or act anti-competitively to either prevent other players from coming into the market or prevent them from competing or operating optimally. That's where the challenge comes in. So competition policy comes in markets where it is very difficult for new players to enter the market, such as digital financial services, and tries to find ways to level the playing field. If there are certain facilities that are difficult to, that are essential to provide the service, for instance, in order to access mobile financial services, you need to have a SIM card. And because, as I mentioned earlier, if you're a fast mover, you're going to access, for instance, the first providers that enter the market. You access MTN, you access Airtel. If you want to access any other mobile financial service, you will have to go through those key providers. So where competition policy comes in is to say, if I'm another provider, I'm a fintech, how do I ensure that my mobile financial service is available through MTN or through Airtel? If I am a SACCO, if I want to make sure that my service is available on the menu of MTN, how can I do that equitably? So competition policy would come in to say, okay, let us ensure that these other fintech players have have reasonable access to key infrastructure, such as the connections to the final consumer. They would come in to say that if you're a new player, I know there have been so many providers in the market, providers that provide insurance products. There are those that provide this Clinic Plus. I don't know if you've heard of it. There are different mobile financial services that are now accessible, savings, credit products that are accessible through the different MTN and Airtel lines. So what competition policy would come in, and Ms. Muhere referred to this earlier, is that they would ensure that, yes, MTN would allow you that access. Of course, this access needs to be it needs to be economically justified. You need to be able to pay for that access, but you should be able to at least have the opportunity to provide your products through those key channels, because there's no other channel to reach your consumer. You either have only MTN, or you either have Airtel. So that is one of the key areas that competition policy comes in, to ensure that there is access to other innovative players, other fintechs who might have financial services. It also comes in places where you find, because there may be a small number of players, that the prices might be too high. It may come in to say, okay, is there excessive pricing in the market? What can we do? How do we investigate to test that there is excessive pricing that is disadvantageous to the consumer? And through this investigation, they could determine if the prices have been excessive, should there be a penalty, should there be some kind of negotiation that results in a reduction in prices? And that's some of the ways in which competition policy can be beneficial, not just to the new providers in the market, but to the consumers themselves. So those are the different ways. And one of the other things maybe I would mention is things like interoperability, where you'd want to ensure that if you're, for instance, on MTN, you'd want to be able to have easy access to send money to Airtel. And you'd want to do that in such a way that is convenient and comfortable. In certain markets, that is not possible, but competition policy can intervene in such areas to have certain negotiations, either to negotiate with the parties involved, or to mandate them to ensure that to ensure that customers can send money comfortably from one provider to another. So, in just a summary.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think you have given us a very big overview of the challenges in the digital realm in regulating competition. Now, I just wanted to, we don't have a lot of time, so I would like to, I don't know if there are any questions in the chat for our panelists in the different sectors. But I would like to ask for general overview, general comments on this topic, competition, regulation. How do we prevent abuse of market power? How do we prevent abuse of dominance? I think Dr. Anthea correctly mentioned that the problem is not dominance, the problem is how you use your dominance. So I just wanted parting shots, and in the parting shots, I will request Watasa to tell us about how do we ensure product safety, how do we ensure consumer protection using our competition law or competition policy. Then we'll go on to Timothy Kaja to give us a general overview of our sports regime and the policy, and how we can actually ensure that there is fairness, there is market fairness in the sports sector. Then Dr. Anthea will tell us, will give us, I think she had discussed the challenges, and she told us how we can ensure that policy, but I just wanted to get parting shots from her. So I'll move on to Sam in just 2 minutes, because we are trying to manage our time. Our guest of honor will be speaking to us soon. So we'll just have 2 minutes each, but for each panelist. Please share your questions in the chat, and we'll see how to respond to them.
Thank you, colleagues and moderator. I would like to differentiate the aspects of consumer protection with respect to competition policy, but also with product standards and quality. To an extent, there are areas where there is an intersection between different aspects of consumer protection and competition policy and law. And those have to do with issues of competitiveness in the market. Now, No.
Mr. Watasa, yes, kindly proceed.
Yes, I'm saying that the aspects of consumer protection vary widely. Some of them are a result of abuse of competition policy and law, or violation thereof, and those have a lot to do with pricing and the effects of foreclosure in the market. But there are aspects of consumer protection that touch on product standards and quality and fitness for purpose that do not necessarily become part of core competition regulation. So, however, when you have an unregulated market from the competition point of view, some aspects, for instance, of abuse of market dominance would be that because you dominate the market, you therefore decide that you will determine the standard of the product you put in the market, because after all, the competition is narrow. And so to that end, you might offload onto the market products that do not meet mandatory or required standards. However, it's not possible for the competition law implementers to deal with that aspect specifically, except specific technological sectors like telecom, as has already been mentioned, because there you can actually enforce the standard of the product that is being used to convey, for instance, signal or other. Now, when it comes to things that we generally consume, the market is so dynamic and the entry barriers are very low, exit is very low. So there we focus more on standardization, because then the entry is by so many parties and exit so many parties. The competition is literally unlimited. So at that point, then you have to introduce a different regime to deal with that, and that is when you get into standardization. Now, once you get into standardization, then the product or service standard is applicable to every person that is participating in that market. So consumer protection intersects with competition regulation in the outcome of the conduct of firms in the market with respect to consumer choice, for instance, because then if you have a market dominance, have limited choice, and if you have limited choice, you are bound to play around with the pricing structure. This happens a lot when it comes to especially monopolies, whether they will be natural or technological. That's where then the standards become compromised without proper monitoring. The pricing structure becomes an issue. And I have given examples of this previously in our engagement. Who in this country understands the pricing structure of delivery of piped water services in the country? And so are we sure that that pricing is fair? Because every time it is going down, it is indexation. We have this in electricity sector. So as far as I'm concerned, where consumer protection is concerned and standardization, we watch out for monopolies and their conduct in the market, and market dominant firms and their conduct in the market with respect to the price structure and how that affects research and development within that sector, and therefore affects the products and services that come off it.
Okay.
But in summary, that is where the bottom line is between competition policy implementation and consumer protection. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Watasa. Maybe just before I can come to Timothy Kaja, there is a question in the chat, and I think it is directed to Dr. Anthea. We are still paying the highest rates for mobile data than anywhere else in East Africa. This is as a result of lack of strict price regulation. Is there a plan to enforce lower data prices that are affordable to a Ugandan? I think this will be better answered by Julian in the chat. And by the way, she spoke about the multi-choice broadcasting rights issue. And just to you, Dr. Anthea, how do we enhance market efficiency by encouraging innovation, by encouraging productivity, if we still have these cases of exclusive rights? How do we enhance market innovation in this financial digital space? If we have companies or entities claiming rights, how do we ensure fairness? How do we ensure fairness as we are encouraging innovation and productivity?
Sure. So I'll speak largely with regards to the financial sector, because that's really my area of expertise. And I'll say generally what has been done is it's a delicate balance, because what you want to encourage the existing players to continue investing. So you don't want to remove exclusivity sometimes immediately. So what you'll find in many jurisdictions is that exclusivity will be permitted for a limited time in the market. And then depending on the maturity and depending on whichever sector, that exclusivity will be opened up to allow new players to enter into the market. So you want to have a balance. You want the original fast movers to benefit from their initial investment into the sector. I'll give an example of in mobile money. When the providers first entered into the market, you find that, for instance, MTN had exclusive agreements with a particular bank in terms of who was the bank that they were dealing with for custodial purposes. But after a limited period of time, I think it was about 3 years or 5 years, it was opened up such that they now have relationships with other banks. You find also with agent exclusivity, it was the same thing. Initially, in many markets, agents were exclusive, could only provide services for one mobile money provider. But as time went on, these exclusivity agreements were prohibited, and you'll find that the market has matured to such a level that even in other markets, they don't, agent exclusivity has completely been removed because it has evolved much faster. You'll see in Tanzania, agent exclusivity was removed much earlier. So in certain markets, depending on the particular characteristics of the sector, you find that there is certain level of exclusivity, which makes sense if you want to encourage investment, but that eventually we want to open this up such that there are innovative providers who can come in and who can provide this dynamic competition such that the consumer benefits from either lower prices, just improved quality of service, and improved technological efficiencies.
Okay, thank you very much for that balance. I want to request Mr. Kaja. We have only 1 minute to give us his parting shots.
All right. Thanks, Michael. In the parting shot, like earlier, saying that the application of regulation and competition in sport is selective, but it's hard to say which is purely sporting and which is not purely sporting. And because of this, we've seen associations abusing their dominant positions. We'll give you an example. In football, which is the most dominant sport, look at FIFA. For every match ball played in every official game in Uganda, just give you a sense of it, every district has a district federation, then there is region, and then there is national leagues. All of them use FIFA match balls. Now, you could ask yourself, what happens to other producers of sporting equipment? What does that mean to them? So there is an abuse of this. And of course, another example is that you say, in the last round of World Cup qualifiers, Uganda played, UBC that used to show us these games for free of charge was told to turn off their signals and broadcast and leave only that to FIFA TV. So you ask yourself, those who couldn't access FIFA TV, what would happen to them? And those who are not happy with the quality of FIFA TV, where would they go? So there is, you could say that there is a bit of smuggling of non-sporting issues into being sporting items for them to benefit from the exclusivity of on an application of competition law. What other markets have shown us is that, for example, in Europe, which is the dominant one, there is a Mecca Medina case that looks at one, the object of exclusion from application of antitrust law and the effect. So if you test whatever you're excluding to the Mecca Medina test in looking at what, when you create a rule that no ball is used in Uganda apart from the FOFA match ball, the Janzi produced by Janzi, what is the object of that? And at the end of the day, what is the effect? How does that affect other players? Or where does it leave other producers of sporting equipment in the country? Then if you find that you do not comfortably fit within the object and effect test established in the Mecca Medina case, then you want to conclude that that is not excluded from application of competition law, and the market should apply fairly, apart from where the object and effect are purely of a sporting nature. That would be my
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Competition is a very, very wide topic. As you can see, we cannot unpack what constitutes market regulation in one webinar. But I would like to now hand over to Ms. Fiona Wall. Please keep the questions, the comments coming in the chat. We shall, our team will be looking at them. Thank you. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you so much, Michael. Those of you that enjoyed the panel, please send your responses, reactions. There's an option in the chat. And please continue sending those questions. Our panelists are online as I welcome our guest of honor. As I said today, she is going to address us and she's going to do something very, very important, which is going to be to launch our conference, our competition law conference. And before she comes on, I just wanted to state that she is the Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, the first Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of East African Community Affairs. She has served previously in 5 other cabinet roles as Minister of State for Regional Cooperation, Transport, and then full cabinet minister for parliamentary affairs, and twice as the deputy speaker and once as the Speaker of the Parliament of Uganda, twice as the Speaker of the Parliament of Uganda. What is amazing about Honorable Rebecca Alitwala is that when you put her anywhere, she excels and she fights for the rights of those that need her most. We know her as the first woman lawyer to set up a law firm, one of the first members of FIDA, one of the presidents of FIDA, Uganda as we know it. But we've also seen, apart from her work in gender, we've seen her amazing work in trade in the region. And she holds 2 honorary doctorates of laws from Busoga University and Nkrumah University. She has a master's degree in law from the University of Zimbabwe, and she has served internationally as the Commonwealth, as the chairperson of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians 2017-2019. She has also served as the member executive committee Interparliamentary Union representing Africa, and she is known for having served on many boards, especially as a founding chair. She's known for establishing a lot of organizations like she was the founding chairperson of the University Council for Mbara University, also for Busoga University, and she is credited with establishing the first legal aid service in Uganda under FIDA Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot explain who she is properly without celebrating her role in trade, especially in COVID-19, when we saw her fighting for equal rights and dealing with the problems that were coming out of the non-tariff barriers. The Right Honorable Kadaga is also the patron of the East African Competition Regulation and Consumer Protection Network. And we're proud to have her as a patron, and I'd like to invite her to speak to us. Before she speaks to us, after she speaks to us, I will speak to the conference, and then she will launch it officially. Right Honorable, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Fiona Wall. And it's been so exciting listening to the panelists on this issue of the competition law. And a very good morning to you. Thank you very much for the Fidelis Leadership Institute for organizing this important discussion on the intersection between regulation and competition. It's been really thrilling to listen to the panelists from all the sectors. And it gives me really thinking that we need to do much more to inform the public. We need to get more people to get involved, more people to champion the competition law. Now, today's theme, intersection of regulation and competition, a delicate balance between market control and fairness. This is very, very timely and critical for economic development. We have a delicate duty of fostering a competitive business environment while ensuring that regulation protects consumers and promotes economic fairness. As you know, competition is the engine of a thriving economy. It drives innovation, enhances efficiency, and reduces costs for consumers. However, without effective regulatory oversight, markets can become susceptible to monopolies, price fixing, unfair trade practices that stifle progress. It's therefore imperative that create policies that encourage healthy competition while protecting consumers from exploitation. As you're aware, we have the East African Community Competition Act of 2006. We also now have a local law in Uganda. We recognize the importance of robust competition frameworks. The Uganda Competition Act of 2024 marks a significant step in strengthening a regulatory landscape. But for this law to be effective, they must be complemented by proper enforcement mechanisms, collaboration among stakeholders, and a commitment to fairness in market regulation. So it means we must invest in the human resource to manage the mechanisms. Regulation and competition should not be seen as opposing forces, but rather as complementary tools in ensuring economic justice. Excessive regulation can hinder investment and innovation, while under-regulation leads to market abuses that can harm consumers. So striking the right balance is very, very crucial. Governments must establish independent regulatory authorities that can effectively monitor and enforce competition policies without undue political economic influence. Additionally, the business community must embrace ethical business practices that promote fair competition. At the same time, consumer rights organizations should play a crucial role in advocating for transparency and accountability in markets. And this reminds me that some time back, there was an attempt to enact a private members law on consumer protection, but somehow it faltered when it reached the Ministry of Trade. But I hope that someone can pick it up now and start again. As members of the East African Community and COMESA must strengthen regional cooperation on competition regulation. A harmonized approach to competition laws will not only ensure fair play among businesses, but also create a conducive environment for cross-border trade and investment. Our commitment to economic integration must be supported by a strong regulatory framework that promote fair market access for all players. Let me close by commending the Fidelis Leadership Institute and its partners for spearheading this discussion on such a crucial topic. Your dedication to leadership development and governance is invaluable in shaping the future where competition and regulation work hand in hand to foster economic growth, consumer protection, and social equity. I have noted that the participants have actively engaged in the discussion, and I know that the discussions will contribute to shaping the policies that will strengthen our regulatory landscape while promoting fairness in the marketplace. Thank you very much. For God and my country.
Thank you, Right Honorable. Thank you very much for your address. And again, on behalf of the East African people for your passion for regionalization. I've spoken to Kenyans who feel that they're also serious beneficiaries of your work. Without further ado, Honorable Minister, we also requested you to officially open our fast, which is going to be the first of its nature. We're going to, in partnership with the COMESA Competition Commission, the Fidelis Leadership Institute is going to host a conference in Uganda. It will be a regional conference on actionable steps for the implementation of competition regulation and consumer protection across East Africa. Honorable Minister, we know that many of the East African countries have not yet implemented these laws, and we believe that we can be champions for this along with the network which you patron. And this regional conference will engage policymakers, regional organizations, industry leaders, academics, competition regulation practitioners, and other seasoned professionals to engage in insightful discussions and explore the critical steps necessary to strengthen regional cooperation towards competition regulation enforcement and consumer protection. This will be between the 11th to the 13th of June 2024. And I invite you as a guest of honor to officially launch it. We're going to hold a more formal launch, but this is our request, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Fiona. As a Minister for the East African Community, I want to welcome you very, very warmly to Uganda. Welcome to the Pearl of Africa, the land of the equator, the land of the Uganda Matters. We look forward to seeing you in Uganda, and I hereby launch the conference. Welcome.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please feel free to give comments, compliments on the chat. As we end, I would like to ask everyone, while Honorable Minister is on, everyone please turn on your cameras. Would like to take some very special screenshots of everybody so that we have a clear record of today. So please turn on your cameras. Somebody is taking screenshots. As we say, what do we say, right, Honorable? Do we say Jumuiya Africa? Oh, Africa Mashariki.
One people, one destiny.
One people, one destiny. Can we say that, everybody?
One people, one
People, one
destiny.
destiny.
One people, one destiny.
Yes. Thank you so much, Honorable. We have really saved the best for last. Thank you, our panelists. Thank you so much, our moderator. Thank you, our keynote speaker. And thank you so much to everybody who's taken off their Friday to learn, to speak, and to be a part of this very important conversation. For those of you that would like to join the network, I've put an email, and you can just email us at that email, ed@fidelisinstitute.org. And on Friday, 21st, we're going to have our first meeting with the network to organize properly for the conference. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic morning. Oh, sorry, fantastic afternoon and weekend. And happy Women's Month, especially you, right, Honorable Kadaga.
So,